Call the June 28th regular board meeting to order. Present, we have the entire board. Andrew Williams, the mayor, Austin Kalman, general manager, Robin, Mike Hoffman, our solicitor. And so at this point, let's raise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. So several announcements before we get started. Item 7 is going to be moved to after our executive session. So we'll send out a separate link to reconvene as soon as that is done. And just wish everyone a happy 4th of July weekend. So with that, let's get started. The consent agenda. We have a motion to approve, or anyone want anything pulled from it?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous. Okay. Inframark report. Mike, Jeff.
Good afternoon.
Hello?
Is that on? Yep. Okay,
You can bring that mic up.
Come up.
There you go.
still cleaning train 3. You have train 3. We are halfway through the 3rd cassette, so we should finish up sometime next week or the following. Going well, everything's going well.
I know Tom and I were out there, I think, for train 1 when you guys were doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the 3rd cassette for train 1.
Got
right?
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
And traditionally, train 1's been the worst, so hopefully that's as bad as it'll get. We had finished all the manhole sump pump and alarm systems, so all 10. He put new junction boxes, watertight junction boxes with watertight seals. And he also put quick connect, watertight quick connect plugs on the pumps. So if the pumps fail in the future, we don't have to go into the box and you just unplug them and plug the new one in.
How often do those pumps run? Do they run fairly regularly or?
It depends how wet it is, but I mean, they do run because the water table is up pretty high, so they run a lot.
Do they only run though when there's been rain, or do they run?
And after the rain. So we notice now that they're all hooked up and discharging to where they're supposed to. We have some water accumulating in the paved areas, but yeah, it's hard to judge because we're very dry and now we've had a bunch of rain. So wait till things normalize if that ever happens.
I was going to say if it ever happens. Thank you.
Had a couple VFD failures over May and June. So, just about every piece of equipment at the wastewater plant has a VFD and they're all 15 years old. So, is it a coincidence? We're kind of preparing and Jeff and Austin had discussed getting some spare VFDs and we did order 3.
Excuse me, what are VFDs?
It's a variable frequency drive. So it's a piece of equipment that we power from the electric panel and it will ramp up, for instance, a pump. Instead of slamming it on at 100%, it will slowly ramp it up and it'll speed up and slow down to accomplish the goal. So it'll for a pump, for instance, if we're pumping down a tank, you can put a set point where you want to maintain that tank at 8 feet. And if the level gets above 8 feet, the pump will speed up. The VFD will make the pump speed up. And if the level gets below 8 feet, it'll slow it down or stop it. So it's a variable frequency drive.
And the other purpose is, Mike, you said, is that it's a soft start, so it extends the life of the motors that it's driving, which is a critical part of it.
Mhm. And they're more electrically efficient and have other protections for the motors and pumps. And we have blowers online at the treatment plant that supply air to the microorganisms. So we got the one VFD in an emergency. We found one on the internet and got it here in a couple days. And the second one we got from United Electric. They had one in stock, but so we're using specifically one brand, Snyder, to keep everything consistent. We did find where they did have some in stock at Granger. They were more expensive, but in an emergency, we could get some at Granger, but we have them both hooked up. The permeate pump is running. We still have to program the VFD for the recycle pump. Other than that, we pushed back the measuring. We're going to try to do it the second week, the 10th to 14th, the second week of July. So with the VFD issues, we've been our electrician's been busy and finishing up the manhole sump pump project. Other than that, we have on the schedule to replace the control panel at pump station 16. We have all the materials to do that. That's going to occur after we do the cable measuring, and then we also have the lighting panel to replace in headworks, and that's third on the priority list. And then I was asked to take a look at the budget and try to do a projection for the maintenance expenses. And if I pull out the rental generator at PS4, that's $1,770 a month. So that ends up being $21,000. And my projection, if I pull that out, project that out through the end of the year, and that would raise the maintenance fee from $80,000 to $101,000. That would give us $30,000 left for the remaining 5 months of the year, because the contract goes through November.
So currently we're 18,000 under.
And so far
But
we've
You're saying that we'd actually wind up being 22 over
basically, yeah.
plus the rental
No,
generator.
basically 22 over,
Oh,
period.
period.
That's,
The rental fee is what amounts to the overage.
I mean, that's,
Oh,
we purchased both these VFDs. They were under $5,000. So no, the one was over $5,000. That's invoiced directly to BPW, but the other one was $4,3,500, and that is going to come out of the maintenance fee. So, and we'll be in communication with Austin as we get closer to to the end of the year, if we have expenses, if we want to wait on them or pass them through or.
so just so I'm clear, then you're really saying is that the 22,000 overage is almost all due to the rental of the pump station 4 generator.
I mean, that's how I'm looking at it for a projection. It's very hard to project, the maintenance, especially, things are, breaking and some of the things, some improvements, to keep the guys busy on improvements. So you get the most for your dollar, we have to purchase some equipment or, materials for them to install and keep moving forward. But again, I will be in contact with Austin if we have any, projected larger expenses. I know Jeff's been in contact with Austin with the VFD issues as they've occurred.
I think, Austin, you had mentioned that we had to rent a second generator for one of the pump stations.
On station
It was
74.
74. And the reason we didn't move the one from 4 to 74 is because we were getting a low rate because it's just a standby generator. If we'd run that generator, it would be $3,000 or $3,400 a month.
Oh, okay.
So that's why we didn't move it.
Okay, makes sense then. Thank you.
That's
Just quick, so the drying beds. Can you explain what's happening there?
I know we're doing pretty well right now. You're not hauling at all. Is that
We
correct?
haven't hauled for a few, probably about 2 weeks.
That goes to the heat or?
So when we had the shutdown on the train, when we refilled our solids dropped and we ended up having very low levels in the digester. So we just got back up to report yesterday, we poured 5 beds. We do have valves that are going in on some of those. I just text Emmett today that he's supposed to be putting in for 3 of the beds. So we have 1 valve that has failed on that.
We're doing it in-house. We bought the
Oh, good.
valves, we're doing it
Good.
in-house.
Okay.
And then on the hauling, we've also talked with CDI, and CDI is working with Sussex County. So instead of hauling to Decorah, which is in Pennsylvania, which we were paying a very large sum of money for, we are now working towards just paying CDI for a transport fee to go to the county under the solids handling agreement until we get the valving in as part of that digester piece.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're doing our best to get the best performance out of the thickener membrane. We cleaned it at the beginning of this month. We have a new transducer on order because we believe that the TMP is artificially elevated because the transducer isn't reading correctly. We took the transducer out and cleaned it, and it performed better for a bit, or the TMP dropped for a bit, but then after a week or so, we started getting elevated TMP. So we ordered it about a month ago, so we're waiting on that, but we're trying to get the solids content in the digesters thicker, and therefore, we're getting more bang for a buck.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I had a couple questions.
Sure.
On your NPDS permit compliance, you show influent BOD and TSS, same for average, min, and max. So is that, you just do a grab sample?
It's actually a 24-hour composite sample, but we're only required to do it once a month. So if we only take one sample, then that's min, max, and the average.
Okay. It's funny that they have you complete min and max if it's a composite. Okay. The other question I had was in regards to the dissolved oxygen meter.
Mhm.
You were using the handheld meter according to DNREC,
Mhm.
and you should have been using a 24-hour recording one. I didn't see any kind of mention about why that was happening or what's been done.
The handheld is more accurate. So we calibrate the handheld every morning, and I wasn't aware of the permit requirement, because we only record, we record one reading a day when we're doing but we're required to monitor it 24 hours a day. So it was a mistake on our part. But we were calibrating our handheld meter every day before we took the reading.
So then do I understand you had the recording DO going?
It was online.
It was
online, but we were putting the result on the DMR,
Okay.
the
from the
discharge
handheld.
monitoring report from the handheld.
Okay, thank you.
And Inframark has responded to the letter last week, I believe it was. And I think it was very thorough and,
Yeah, thank you.
Have you heard anything back from DNREC on that? By
No, I
chance?
think Jenna was on vacation.
Vacation was.
Just to go back, so the generator, which we've talked about it multiple times, the reason why we haven't moved forward, even though the board approved buying it, is because that generator can't fully sustain from the information we got back from Keystone, that generator can't sustain both pumps running at one time. So right now, that's there as a temporary measure. Should we move towards a bypass pump, that would be there 100% of the time until we figure out the final plans for pump station 4. That's another decision. Plus, as we move towards the wastewater treatment plant discussion and the long range planning, there's the possibility under one of the circumstances, actually two of the circumstances, of building a larger pump station that has temporarily been selected over on the beach side. But should that change and become pump station 4, then that generator then changes the whole sizing, because you're going to put different pumps, et cetera. So the way that it was sized is that the pumps that are existing today, with the future loading of a bar screen or some sort of aeration in the wet well, would require a 100 kW generator. The one that's there now, the temporary, is 60. And the one that's failed, which was the existing generator, was also a 60. A little bit backstory.
A lot of moving parts right now, so.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Inframark? Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great weekend.
I
Thank
do have-
you.
do have a question, not for,
Oh,
not for you guys, but it's related to treatment plant. Where are we with the Edworks project?
So M2 is finalizing their final documents within the bid package, and then that will be coming my way, and then I will execute it, and then that will trigger the ordering of materials and the planning of schedules, et cetera.
Great. So you anticipate that shortly.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
I think they're working on final bonding. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank you much.
holiday, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, so President's report. As everyone knows, we've been very busy with meetings. We met with DNREC on the wellhead protection kickoff. And so that is hopefully in progress, but as everyone knows, that's an 18 to 24 month project. So we had a meeting with Ørsted Wind, Austin and I, to understand where they're at with their offshore wind projects. Kind of the mayor and city council meetings. We met with the SCAT dinner, and we've held multiple meetings on the wastewater treatment plant. The last workshop was last week, and we will be holding one on the 19th of July, correct? Yeah. So that was what I had.
Sure.
Austin?
So on Donovan Smith, they are working in Cooper Circle installing the sewer main. They finished up the water main on Donovan's Road. I believe they had final paving in. So that work's done within Donovan's Road. We also, Robin and I went and attended a lead and copper with Eric and Vaughn. It was a class to look at what's coming down the pike on the lead and copper side. It's a lot. We have a lot that we need to do within kind of a expedited time frame. I believe it's October 14th of 2024.
We have the resources to do that.
Yeah, so we're working with GMB's folks. We have Josh and Mike working on it. We have to upload all of our data, see where we stand, and then if we have pockets and areas that we don't have full confirmation both on our side and the customer side as far as material, then you have to move forward with assuming that it's lead or galvanized, or you physically have to go and start doing potholing and identifying them. There's a good chance, we'll have to get a contractor to help us because of the amount of services we have, especially in the historic district. But we're working through that. I think it'll start shining light here once we get stuff uploaded and we see where we're at, benchmark ourselves. We hosted a tour of our facilities from DMEC. They actually came down. We're the first member to do it. So they came down. We had probably about a half an hour, 45-minute discussion in the council or in the the BPW conference room, kind of explained who the BPW was and what we do. And then they went and took a tour of all of our facilities. We also, thanks to Mike, worked through the NIPD's permit renewal. It's about a 60-page document with a bunch of flow charts and maps. That was all submitted, I believe, the middle of this month. They responded back the following day and gave the administrative review, which basically means it looks like everything's on order. And if they need any other documents that they would reach out. So we did ask for an extension because you're supposed to submit it 6 months ahead of time. We asked for about a month or two extension, which basically it's due to be finalized in October when the permit ends. So everything's been submitted. We're basically on waiting to see if anything comes up. Trying to think. We also received the binding commitment letters. So WEAC approved both the canal crossing project and the water tower project. I received the binding commitment letters yesterday. My plan is to execute the binding commitment letters, send them off to the respective agencies, and then that kickstarts Mike's firm and Saul Ewing working through the final documents for the resolutions before mayor and city council and before the board for approval so that we can go to closing, and then those projects get moving full blast. And we all know that those are probably one of the two, if not the two biggest projects in the next couple of years. We're going to stand on Josh's report. We're going to work through that. We're starting to compile it as more of a confidential document that we're going to circulate to the board every month so you guys can see exactly what's going on. Sharon, do you have anything social media wise? And any questions for Kim on the financials? Kim, if you have any highlights?
Just for highlights, the overall we performed over budget, better than budgeted. The only underperforming utility was water for May. We had a long billing period and we had 2 inches less rain, so our irrigation numbers were up considerably. And our year to date, we're doing better than budgeted. We're actually doing worse than last year and we're operating at a loss, but that's not unusual for our first quarter. And cash graphs, we're holding pretty steady at $8 million. We're losing a little bit of money, gaining a little bit of money from our investments, but it's not as dramatic
Only $100,000.
as it was, but we're still having months that we're losing sometimes 6 figures.
And we're scheduled to have a meeting with our investment advisors, which Richard and Barbara will be attending.
And also for audit on Friday, they sent over a draft. We need to do manager discussion and analysis. And I need to do audit entries. There's a couple questions that I had on the entries, so they just sent the backup yesterday morning, so.
Gonna be busy.
Any questions on the financials?
No.
Thank you. All right, moving on. So as we said, we're going to move item 7 to after the executive session, and Sharon will send out a new link. So. Item 8. Open forum and general discussion on logo and painting of the new water tower.
Yeah, so we're expecting you to pick logo and color today.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is narrow down kind of, if you decide you want to go with what I deem as water tower blue, then we'll work at bringing something back next month to actually show you, try and give you the best representation the picture can do. But what we really want is the idea for the color so that we can narrow it down, because right now you can go through and pick every shade that you can think of. So that's one. And two,
Is there a color that's better? And I mean, from a efficiency perspective,
I don't think you really have to worry about efficiency
No.
when you're dealing water.
no issues at all.
No. We talked about some of the upgrades that you can do to the tower itself from a coating perspective, which gets you like, I think one's a 20-year coating instead of a 15-year coating. I may get the numbers mixed up, but we talked about doing that. But at the end of the day, really, it's just selecting the style of color, which is, do you want water tower blue? Do you want tan? And then we could come back with some sort of representation so you guys can see it the best you can without doing site visits, which we can coordinate site visits, but just so you guys can understand. And then also on the logo, do you guys want the Lewes BPW logo on, both sides of the tower? Do you want others on the tower? Just so that we can coordinate, because that's going to be included in the bid packet.
I had a crazy idea. Could we sell advertising to SPI and have them help us pay for the water tower? Put them on one side and Lewes BPW on the other and maybe get a few million out of them.
That's an idea. I was wondering if we could have, one thing on the one side, which is Lewes BPW, whatever that is, and on the backside for the school. But I don't know how that lines up with their fields and all that kind of. I tried to drive through and figure it out the other day, but I couldn't figure it out.
All we're looking for is kind of direction, and we'll handle everything else, and we'll come back to you guys. So if you guys want us to approach any organization, if you want it to be the 3 entities involved in the Jones Farm, if you want it to be BPW in the school district, whoever you want, we'll coordinate and then circle back with you with what that would look like to ultimately be included.
The school may be willing to pay as well.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea, but I don't think we want to start advertising for other people. I do think we should have the city's name on there, in addition to ours. And so 2 things.
I think that's a given, really.
Yeah, so.
Is
Yeah,
it
but that's similar to the
anticipated
current-
that the cell
current
towers will be
Yes,
there
current,
too?
for sure.
So we're working through the discussion with the cell towers to make sure we're not the existing towers that are there on Wellfield Lane. So we're having that discussion with the Sussex County, I believe Comcast. And then we're actually going to be putting conduit that goes all the way up to the top. Should we have any sort of approach from AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, whoever it may be, that want to come and be on that tower as well. So we're planning ahead. Ocean City did something similar to a much higher degree than what we are, but we're including options within the bid package for the railings that allow for the connection of antennas on the top, and the conduit for them to put their infrastructure in along with ours.
We're gonna put them in ourselves and then just expect people to come and use them. Rather than having them, notifying them we're doing it, having them help pay for it.
I think either way, you would include that within the lease, whatever lease you come up with, like on the current water tower, there's a number in there. It doesn't matter either way, we can reach out and say, this is what's coming down the pike. But at the end of the day, we want to include it in the bid package that these are going to be in there.
Do we have 2 up there now, 2 different companies?
Yes, I believe it's AT&T and Verizon, I think. Don't quote me on it. There's 2. I know there's 2. So whichever one your phone service is that you don't like, we'll call.
So those empty conduits and railings and so on would fall in the context of impact fees?
Well, the railing is for safety. One of the things, because you don't have to put the railing up there. One of the items we discussed is putting the railing up for safety. But then the communications can also attach to the railing if they were to put anything up as far as antennas. The conduit, again, you would assess that to, whoever would want to use it. It would be a part of those lease terms.
But I think we should coordinate with them. Telling them that we're doing this and others that maybe want to do, because there's maybe things that we could put in now. Make it easier for them and easier for us, rather than putting up stuff and having them have to jury rig things to make it work.
So what I'll tell you is that we talked with other municipalities that put water towers up to see what they did. As a planning perspective, like Ocean Cities is, how many conduits is it? 52 in Ocean City. And so it's kind of a lessons learned approach. Each municipality or entity, Tidewater, Artesian, puts up a tower, they do it differently. But we've actively been discussing to make sure that whatever we put in makes the most sense
Sure.
and accommodate it.
Yeah.
But we can reach out to them.
Think more about the space at the base of the tank for their facility.
Good.
So logo and color, what are you thinking?
Well, I voted for lavender and I got nixed, so
Is,
I mean, I've seen, I think the light blues seem to be the least invasive. I think they kind of
is it
blend.
supposed to be like sky blue? Is that the idea that it blends in a little bit or
There's a whole palette of blue.
Yeah.
is there a
Like everything
sky
else.
gray kind of thing?
They had tank white, what was the one that we think was Tidewaters? It was like spring rain or spring water. Yeah, there's robin's egg, teardrop, you name it, they got it. But
I would say that. Darker you get on that paint chip chart, the more dark it's gonna be up on the tank, so the later you probably, that's.
I agree, less
agree.
invasive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like they make a color that's called tank white, that's a very light shade of blue. But what we'll do is, like I said, if you're thinking like a lighter blue, then we'll go and get some sort of idea from pictures and then we'll circle back about this. And then same with the logo so that you guys can get an understanding. Cause like the new Tidewater tank, which is off of Roxana Road, they did Millville by the Sea because they actually built it on a parcel within Millville by the Sea. So Millville by the Sea is on one side and Tidewater's on the other.
What color is it? Do you know the color?
It's not the same manufacturer, but I think it's very similar to like the tank white. It's almost like that water. It's iconic, the water tower blue. But like Milford did tan. Milford has a tan water tower.
This is Kings Highway or Savannah?
Kings.
Anything but this current color of the tank. Looks like a spaceship.
Hey, I look at it at the back of my house. I love the spaceship.
Yeah, so here,
It's not exactly.
It's like a nuclear power plant. Is that what-
No, it's a UFO hovering over the horizon.
that's the Tidewater one.
That picture a little different. than what
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
pictures
I
on
mean, I think the lighter the better.
So
I like the idea of talking to the high school about that one side. Looking at this picture, it seems like it would be something they might be interested in.
just an idea of how many people do you want on there from a logo perspective so that we can accommodate them?
I think that's the one is Lewis and in the back is for the school,
Lewis meaning our logo?
or some aspect of our logo, yeah.
Well, the logo we have up there now has got the city symbol and BPW.
We would charge the city a certain amount, I would assume.
And the high school.
We'll sublet to the SPI.
See, that's one.
But Lewis, I mean, it's high school isn't in the city.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at well, look, I think it's the right thing to do. They're the ones that are gonna be looking at that tower the most. It's aligns with their football field incredibly well for the home stands. I think it's the right thing to do, but it's the will of the board.
But the Vikings.
Whatever their cape and open symbol is. It is a Viking, I think.
Do you have any other schools in those? I know that the secret, they had the secret Christian, meeting, so they had a similar discussion. But it fell apart. But it didn't go apart and stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you consider Bethel daycare to be a.
Middle school. Light blue.
Light blue's already down.
Okay.
And then explore orange and the city logo facing Kings and talk to the school district about if they'd be interested in something on the side facing the sports
I
field.
think it'd be a nice gesture.
And that would be us
This
putting it
space
up
for
or
rent.
asking them
Yeah, I would ask them to do it.
to put it up.
I can personally do it, you know.
So you're. So you're thinking we'd have three different,
No, too. Well, you'd have what you have over here on this,
Yeah.
right? And then just that's on the other side. It's completely on the other side. We can ask them. We can always change our mind. We say,
Well-
just say we're considering it and get their.
if there's a room for three. I mean,
Well, who would the third be?
the school. That's in the city, BPW, and
But it's a combined logo that's up on the current tower, right? It's got
It's only on
the
one side.
shield in the middle of it and it says Lewes BPW.
that's what we were thinking. Okay,
Yeah, I was
I didn't
thinking about
realize.
replicating
Okay.
what we have and then. Because I don't think we want to make it sign clutter.
No,
think you would
that's what
wanna
I was
do
worried
that,
about.
because otherwise you'd have one delivery space in the forest.
yeah,
Yeah.
What's the circumference of the tower?
Depends on the size.
Conference?
Yes.
2 pi r, right?
What happened to me today?
Yeah, we can get that for you.
I mean, you know, that's a function of, you know, how much you can see at any one point.
This is whether 750 or anything else.
Yeah, the current one has Lewis and then it has our logo on one side and the city's logo on the other.
so. All the times I've looked at it, I thought they were separate. They're not the same.
Our crest is on one side and
Yeah,
the
it's either on
city's
two different
crest is on the
sides,
other.
they're not on the same view.
And it doesn't say Lewes BPW, it
It
just
says
says.
Lewis.
Yeah,
That's the difference.
I look at it every day and I don't have the slightest idea what it says.
There you go, Mike.
There it is, look at this.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, but it is, so it's the two emblems with this, okay. And the tank will be 3 to 4 times the size. And as has been pointed out, the one side you can't see from the highways. It's really only from the school. And the other side that would be prominent from Kings Highway or Old Orchard would be our emblems.
Charlie, do we procure a design for that and submit? Or does the tank manufacturer provide that?
No, we had that, yeah, we had that, we did that.
Did we
Part of the maintenance project.
did we go to a certain person for the design? Or did we just say we want 2 crests and the paint?
I think we did, I have to go back and look at the records, I don't remember.
Did we just repeat what was there?
That's what I would suggest,
No, that mean the last one. Did you?
No, before it just had block letter and. Lewis.
Okay.
It wasn't much, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't even remember that.
That's an upgrade to what was there for
Okay.
decades.
Okay,
We do have that, Paulson, if you want to go that direction, that combine, go to. We can talk about that.
The Blue Gorth has an old one on it.
Well, we can work through that. We have a general consensus.
yeah,
Yeah.
All right, so I think we have a sketch to go on from at this point, and we can bring it back up at the next meeting to,
but have we decided the high schools? We're going to wait the high school to. Or is that still being decided? I'm not sure.
I thought- I thought we-
I'm not really keen on it.
I'm not either,
why is that?
because they're not in the city, I guess.
It serves the
Unless
city.
they're willing to pay.
Let them put up a banner.
It's the will of the board.
Build a board. I
I
think it's the right thing to do.
I mean,
They're the ones that are.
they may not be in the city, but they serve the city of Lewis. So, I mean, it is,
They have schools in the city.
Water tower won't be in the city.
yeah, true. So maybe we should put the county emblem on it. So, all right, let's go around then. All those in favor of approaching the school district? Okay,
Wow, no school spirit.
all right. So I guess we're gonna do just City of Lewis and Lewis, BPW.
And we'll work on something, try and bring it back so you can visually see it.
Are you looking to put it on both sides of the tank?
I think the idea would be similar to what we have today. Probably face Savannah as you're leaving and face Kings as you're entering. Or vice versa, but I would think you have a better eye coming from Savannah looking at the tower and also coming in Kings looking at the tower.
All right, and then that and the light blue, and we can refine the palette on that.
Yep.
Okay. Item 9. Open forum general discussion on the 5-year capital projects with GMB. Water main assessment.
So when we ended our meeting last Thursday, the task was for us to work on some narratives associated with each one of these projects, which is what we put together. It's basically a 3-page document that walks through each one of the projects, the reasoning, the rationale behind each one. And this was circulated yesterday. And then we put a budget together, which was a 5-year and also a 10-year budget, because simply you looking at these projects, it's not physically doable to do all these projects within 5 years. So what we did is we spread them out over 5, and I kind of utilized past experience numbers for, price per foot as it relates to the Town Road project, but then also looking at the Donovan Smith project and as we move forward, other projects that are going to get put out to kind of put something together as it relates to what this is going to look like over the course of the next 10 years. So looking at it from a 10-year perspective, the kind of consensus is that we're looking about $40 million if we were to move forward with all these projects and accomplish them over the next 10 years. Is it feasible? There's a lot of combination between state roads. And if you look at it, it's kind of heavier towards the second half of that 10-year. You have the Cedar, you have the Kings Highway, you have the Cape and Open Drive. The way that I look at this is there's some pilot projects that I think make sense. The water main that goes underneath Freeman Highway from Monroe to Monroe Extended, the future White's Pond and White's Pond Preserve. That water main is an old cast water main that we discussed doing a lining project on because it only serves domestic to two houses that are actually on that main. And seeing, because the industry has new technologies and new ways of doing it, we got a price to replace it, and the price to replace it was $150,000, and you had to case 75% of the water main because it's in DRBA right away, and that's their policy. With the main existing, if you were to line it, you don't have to case that pipe. And so when you look at the projects like Cape Henlopen Drive, which are the mains that feed SPI and Cape Shores, those have tie-ins that could potentially qualify for a lining project. But again, here's a smaller project that we can look at trying to do it on to see if it would pertain to future projects, even looking at Bay Avenue Extended, where that water main kind of goes underneath a lot of those driveways from the Children's Beach House towards the yacht club. We talked about that potentially being a project. So I just basically compiled everything over the next, what I deem is kind of the next 10 years and put them into a capital plan and then broke it down to a 5-year. Obviously, the 5-year is what we run off of, 5-year for water, sewer, electric, and storm. But making sure that you guys are aware of our 10-year period, this is the idea behind it. Happy to go through it.
I just got this late yesterday afternoon, and
Yeah.
I couldn't work on it last night. I did go through it this morning with the time I had. And I was hoping to see this and this line up. I can't quite get there. So what are we talking about? I mean, is there another map of this so we can see this more clearly?
I mean, we only had 4 days to turn this around. So, we were trying to do the best we can. The question is, do you want staff to make the recommendation on the individual projects that we should move forward with? Or what I did is I put all the narratives behind it and then broke it out to what seems more reasonable, which is tackling like the new road as one project and then looking at like 4th Street from Park to DuPont as one project, but stubbing into Johnson.
But these headings here and these don't kind of line up. And that's the thing, problem I had was trying to figure out which ones were which. I mean, I did it in my head, but I never quite
I mean, I,
marked it up to see if it's all the same thing.
Also, I think we kind of broke out the Park Johnson DuPont, those into like discrete projects that probably aren't in the Lewes assessment report. Cedar Avenue, Kings Highway, those are pretty clearly described in
Yeah.
this and the report. But I guess for budgeting purposes, we broke out the Park Johnson corridor into different projects, so it might be the problem.
I'm just trying to compare this to the, and I wasn't sure that they were all the same.
the majority of them are. I mean,
Okay.
we can redo the map to kind of correlate each one and color code it.
And use the same terminology. That would be helpful because you have different
And-
names on here than on
I
here.
thought there was a second map that you had shown us. It wasn't in the report, but you brought up that had the specific streets and stuff. Because one of the problems, this doesn't have the detail in it.
Yeah.
And I know I've seen that other more detailed one.
Because I like this. And I'm not sure it's the same as this, I guess, without. I don't have one minor suggestion on this one, but I guess if they're close enough.
They're relatively the same. I broke out maybe a couple of them. A lot of this also had to do with coordinating with the city on street replacement projects and street replenishment projects.
There's one.
We have that data yet into this.
No, but the idea was is that if you take these as huge chunks. And then we approach the city and say, if we're doing a $4 million project and $1 million of it is roads, then they have to then talk about whether or not it makes sense for their planning to do a.
That's a question I had also, is the 40 million overall, that includes all road work and everything, it's just not broken out city versus BPW.
To put things in realistic terms, and you guys can help me out on this, when we were on Powhatan Road, the price for the water main per foot was $650 a foot. The price for water main installed in Donovan Smith is $85 a foot, $80 a foot.
Yeah, but that's not apples to apples, because 650 is including the paving, which was a big chunk of the cost. When you say that 80 something dollars to put on Donovan, that's just the water main installation. I'll include the paving.
Even if you take 50% of it for the paving, you're talking 300 to 80. In relative terms. So it's just so that you guys can wrap your heads around when you look at some of these projects that are, $10 million plus. A very large portion of it is Del Dot. And I do have in here the suggestion that when you talk about Cedar, that discussion includes three parties, us, the city, and also Del Dot. Because it's Del Dot's road and even on Donovan's Road, we improved Donovan's Road. And there's probably 14 inches of base paving in there. And there was probably 2 before.
I mean, I think to answer your question, if you're asking if we want to select this or you just do your thing, I think it should be you, obviously. I just had one comment that I don't know why Washington was dropped out because it's right there. It's people that live along there need their road torn up, I think. So.
You gonna do it this weekend?
That's railroad.
No, this one here, coming across this way.
Oh, yeah, that's Washington.
It's Washington. It just seems to be, should be part of that system and.
Also, another question I have, if I can, is when you refer to the Monroe as a pilot project, how long does would the pilot take to prove out?
No, the way that I look at it is you would bring a company in here to see if it's doable and then get a proposal for it. And we've done it. We've just done it from converting a water main to a sewer main, which was when we coordinated with Sussex County.
But it's not a matter of waiting for years to see if the lining holds or
No,
that's not what you're referring to.
I think the technology is fairly proven. It's just to see if it's monetarily a right move versus replacing the main.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Austin, how does this tie in with the lead and copper kind of work?
What I will tell you and what we were told when we were up at the lead and copper, what would you say, workshop? Is that the way that the EPA and state views it is that if you have cast mains that have lead joints, the EPA views that as not a project that they fund, but they will fund a project where you have lead goosenecks that serve a property. So in this terms, you can get funding, but you can only get funding on the services. If you move forward with funding on the services, then they say you replace the service into the house to the first valve or 2 foot behind the foundation wall.
And the reason that they're not funding it on the main side is because they consider the lead hubs to be stable. That's a question, because I've heard
I will
that,
answer it with yes.
yeah.
I think that's
Because
the best
I've
way.
seen, that's what I've seen written, that they consider that stable as long as you don't change water chemistry.
In terms that it's already leaked.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Charlie.
yeah.
Which doesn't give you a warm fuzzy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that would be my feeling that basically I like this. If you've selected that, I think they're the right ones. Not sure how it compares exactly to this, but if they're close.
It's pretty close. The biggest thing is that we obviously, I reached out to Anne Marie about having the coordination piece with city budget because it changes their budget up completely depending on how we move forward and how big of a chunk you take at a time. Obviously you have like the Pilottown Road side streets, Hornkill, Harborview, Rodney. All of those are carried. They're all included, but I have it broken out by one project a year for 3 or 4 years. Same thing with looking at Johnson, and the city's doing a 4th Street project, but their project stops at Park. Our water main, should everything move forward and the world's perfect, we would extend from the end of Park and go all the way down to Burton, where the existing PVC is from where Randy Burton installed. So you would have a brand new main that would be stubbed into each one of the side streets. And then it's determination of, do you do one side street a year or do you do all of it at one time? And that coordination with the city. So basically we put this in front of you for you to see it. I know it was quick. We had a meeting last Thursday. We turned it around in a couple of days. We can go back, modify the map and circle back in July or schedule a workshop in July to kind of go through it again. Either works. We just wanted to try and get something relatively quick back to you in a tentative manner.
I have another question.
Yeah.
The DuPont to Sussex existing loop,
Yeah.
you want to eliminate that. And I know it's because of access issues with the school and stuff, but wouldn't that be a cheaper access because you don't have roads, you just have dirt? Is that your?
So we got a price to replace it. The issue is that it's very, very tight back there. So you have natural gas main and you have our water main. And the question was, if we install it, then access itself becomes an issue to the water main should anything happen, because they're building the new fields and everything else that's going on back there. So the discussion was, instead of having that main in service, you can connect in, for example, Burton doesn't connect in at Queen Anne and 3rd, and Bradley doesn't connect in on Queen Anne, and 4th turns into Mariner's Retreat, but 4th doesn't connect in at Ocean View Boulevard. So these are all kind of areas or pockets that if you make that connection hydraulically, does it make up the difference, if that's the easiest way to put it? Because what's happening is, like, from a fire flow perspective, you would need an 8-inch main that would go back and serve the DuPont school. But then how much hydraulically does it affect the main that goes from DuPont to Sussex? Because Sussex basically turns and burns down Sussex and goes across into Pilottown Village and Pilottown Reserve from a water flow standpoint. And that's what, Ben runs that model in Kentucky Pipe. And then we've talked about it many a times. The biggest fear is as you have pipes that traverse over different pieces of property and knowing what that final build out's going to be, it's always a concern of access should anything happen and what that disruption looks like. And you have a gas main right next to it. So it's not just you have access to it, but then you have access with another utility next to it.
I'm just looking at the chart on the sample data.
Mm.
I don't see it on here. Has that been sampled or do we have that line we're talking about replacing around the school from Sussex to DuPont? Do we have any information on that? I know it's iron, but was it looked at or do we have any feel for what kind of condition it's in? I mean, I hate to take out a pipe unless it's, yeah.
Because it's left over from something like that. I don't know if you have a sample of it. And model it.
I mean, we modeled taking it out, but I don't know I think they had to do deflecting work to.
They had to-
relate stormwater.
The stormwater, they had to cut out. Yeah.
Sample, but I'm not personally aware.
Yeah, I don't see it on this. So I'm not sure what kind of condition it's in.
Yeah, it was a most recent project. I don't think it was that long ago that they did that work.
You can ask Derek
Yeah.
I just don't know. Okay, but I'm sorry.
But it would seem like if the three other tie-ins would replace this adequately, then abandoning the line is probably the
What
best
three
thing.
tie-ins you've done?
The ones that Austin just talked about.
No, just-
Yeah, you would have the fourth to Ocean View. You have a brand new main on Powhatan Road, so you would have fourth to Ocean View, and then you would have Burton at third.
Yeah.
So you'd have the hydraulic flow that way versus,
Plus, yeah.
And then you talk about then you look at New Road and that small piece of New Road that if you replace that, then you have an upsized main that would bring water from the brand new pipe down Powhatan Road down New Road. So you're hydraulically kind of shifting everything around.
At the property between Savannah and New Road.
Right.
Is obtained. That would be perfect.
that would be on additional
Yeah,
top, yeah.
yeah.
And that would be a clear access, unobstructed, and
Yeah.
would help with our pressure issues on New Road. All right, so I guess maybe why don't we circle back next month and unless there's any other questions on this now? So I think you've got the input and we'll circle back.
But again, I'll say this is great information. Yeah.
I mean, I'd just add maybe that what Austin put together sort of addressed what you were talking about, whether in terms of like, because we're front loading the Park Johnson behind. Big project, and we kind of feel like that'll have the most bang for our buck in terms of water quality.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Next item is open forum general discussion on lessons learned. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Barbara at this point. And we can discuss some of what she heard during her campaign.
I you all have the handout. You know, I didn't count number of people who had these comments, and these are the ones that stuck in my mind, either because in campaigning, I really didn't know the answers to the questions, or because they were repeated, or sometimes I didn't know whether they were BPW issues or other or city issues, that sort of thing. But in general, we all know there were questions about voting. People were disgruntled that when they arrived at BPW and discovered they couldn't vote. So I think, a lot of this probably has to do with how do we communicate better with our customers? And, the huge outpouring of interest at our board meetings and what can we do to change that? That sort of thing, but
Guys, yes, question. Austin, how many did we have that came and couldn't vote?
And
Okay.
Is that more or less than last year? Because it was a lower turnout as well.
I wasn't here last year, so I have no idea.
I'd have to say it was probably a little bit less. I want to say when it was the previous election, it was about 14 that showed up that couldn't vote.
Yeah.
But then like the people that came, they registered
Yeah.
right then and
I
there.
think I had 7 of them go ahead and register.
For the next,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I really only had 3 that were really physically, you could see them upset and then walk away. But other than that, they're like, oh, we didn't know, so now we do, so.
Yeah, and you know, one of the questions that came up was why our elections are different than the cities.
yes.
And, you know, the city has resident voting only, and we have, if you're a customer. So going to a state role actually would disenfranchise people. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's a difficult one, but, you know, we're open to ideas. But I think you're correct. We do need to do a better job of communications in advance of the elections. And
Well, the question that comes up too about, why do they need to pre-register?
Right.
And if they can show proof of having a service, why couldn't that be the registration?
I don't know. I'll have to turn to Mike and say, does the state have anything?
As I sit here right now, I can't answer that, but I can look into it and follow up with the board.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not sure if there's state laws that require you to do that before or not.
It's within the charter
The charter.
about who is eligible to vote and
Right, but the
That's-
timeliness.
yeah.
Yeah,
The registration is the question. So eligibility, and there are rules that govern the elections in the charter, but the question in terms of pre-registration and whatnot, I just have to unpack that. I
Yeah.
don't know as I sit here.
That'd be
Yeah,
a simple solution. and
yeah,
I think
to
it'd be fair.
register on the day and vote.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, I know what some states have done is that you can contingent vote and then it has to be cleared afterwards, but
As long as you can prove that was your bill and you have a meter.
all right, well, let's
Yeah.
defer to Mike and
How long does somebody stay active on their voter logs between votes?
they have to vote in the last 2 elections, and if they have not voted in the last 2 elections,
One of the
One is
last
the
two.
last
one of them, yeah, just one of them, then they are removed.
Okay.
So
And we send those letters.
certified.
Okay.
Yeah, generally, there were questions about, how we set priorities, strategy for long-term management of our utilities. And I didn't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure I still know the answer, but I'm learning. Do we have like an annual retreat or strategy setting session or anything like that?
We've done long range strategic plans that kind of give us. And we follow up on them every year with commenting on whether we're going along with that strategic plan. I don't think we do a good job of that, but we do that.
yeah,
We're
actually,
about due for,
yeah, I think when since you've been on, you did a summary review of the last strategic plan. But one of the keys is that plan was 4 years ago,
I think it's been
5 years.
Have you seen the plan? It's a really nice document. Would you,
All right.
I think we've talked about that before. Yeah.
But it is time to get updated because a lot of the items either were completed or conditions have changed significantly now that they need to be. So that's something that we're planning on doing this fall, winter.
Austin will send you a copy of the plan because it's really interesting to go through. Because it's very comprehensive. It says all the questions asked by the public with public workshops, all those questions are listed in there just like this. It's really a good document.
And we had multiple meetings with the consultant, and they really did a great job of facilitating, so.
Next, there was, people wanting to know, why don't we hear more from the BPW about what's going on? Other than attending meetings, but the open house that the city had a couple months back, maybe that's something we could get involved with as well.
I think, yeah, Tom and I discussed that the next
Yeah.
year for sure,
Yeah.
we would include the BPW and have a presence there.
But, Sharon has done a fantastic job of upgrading the website.
Oh, it's so much
And
better.
So, a lot of the questions, and later on you have something about, I pointed out that there's a section of FAQs, and we probably need to re-review that and maybe incorporate some of this into those FAQs and look at it. But there is a fair amount of information on the website also. And, we're holding monthly workshops on the wastewater treatment plant. We hold a fair amount, but we're open to, I'm certainly open to ideas of what we can do better or how to do it better.
Yeah, this be a great addition to the FAQs. It has, we could do a few every month, add a few.
One thing that might get more people who have concerns attending meeting might be if we had public comment before the meeting starts, if they have an issue they want to raise with the board versus having to sit through our sometimes very long meetings and wait to speak at the end. Or do it both. We're doing that in the Environment Committee meeting for the LPC on the city side. So it might encourage people to come.
That's soon.
Yeah,
Yeah, as long as and I don't see this happening, as long as it didn't take into a lot of discussion that goes on for hours before we could get into the business.
we could limit,
Yeah.
limit to
Yeah.
3 minutes kind of thing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we've never had to really enforce that in the past,
Yeah,
because you don't want to cut people off, but
And I guess we have to worry about what we talk about if it's not in the agenda.
Correct. So you can, and City of Newark actually does this, where they have their comment period at the beginning of their agenda. So you can do it. You would set parameters. I think one of the common parameters is that anything that's actually on an agenda, the comment would be limited. You wouldn't take comment on that item. That would have to occur with the agenda item. But if there's just taking public comment, you can take the public comment. You just can't discuss an item and get into the weeds.
yeah, it's a listening session.
and another thing that people do occasionally look at the website, and one of the people I was talking to wondered whether it made sense to buy an electric vehicle if most of our power comes from fossil fuel sources, because all you're doing is moving where the CO2 is emitted. And they said they went to the website and looked to see what are the sources of our electricity. How much is coal, how much is oil, that sort of thing. And you can't find that on our website.
Well, as I wrote you back, the state mandates the mix. But the second comment would be the emissions from a car, a fossil burning car. It's not just relocating them to a power plant, because a power plant has much stricter emission requirements. So even if you move from an electric vehicle or from a fossil fuel vehicle to a stationary fossil power plant, your emissions go down drastically because they have scrubbers, they can do other things in the plants, and they're required to.
Yeah, I thought that they weren't controlling CO2 emissions
not CO2.
Yeah,
but
and that's
but
what people are worried about is CO2,
Yeah.
global warming emissions, greenhouse gases.
nitrites, all
Right.
the other type of emissions.
Right,
But the state doesn't really dictate the mix. It has a minimum for certain things in the,
Your renewable portfolio.
Right.
standard.
Yeah, renewable
Yeah.
portfolio,
it
right.
doesn't dictate, that's a minimum.
Right.
Right.
just a suggestion that, people were looking for. They were also curious about, how much water and how much electricity is consumed by Lewes residents or Lewes ratepayers. And over time, in total per year, different seasons, that sort of thing. They wanted to look at conservation trends, and it's perhaps something we should be looking at too for conservation purposes.
And, one of the key steps of that is AMI.
Yeah.
Because, that has the data collection and data reporting functions. So we can do it on a global scale, but not necessarily to the individual level. So,
There were some people complaining about having called and left a message to one of the board members, call back, and they didn't. Yes, those things can get lost. A bunch of people said to me, BPW, they've got all that money in reserve, millions of dollars. Why? And they're swimming in cash. Do they pay taxes on that? What do they do with all that money? It was interesting, and I think we need to do a little bit of education about why we have those cash reserves and how they're needed. There's also questions about how far outside the Lewes city limits we can provide services and how the city and the BPW decide, whether someone can get service, who gets annexed. And as more places get annexed, that extends out the area that we can serve if there's a need. And what does that do to our long-range planning? It was all that kind of issue.
So and that's laid out in the charter as far as how far we can serve.
Yeah.
And, our charter was amended with this, when our issues with the city, that requires that we get permission to serve anything outside the city limits from the city council. So, that MOU and the charters are up on the website.
But so what if the city wanted us to provide service somewhere and we didn't have the money in our budget? Can we turn them down, or just how does that work?
Well, I'm not sure that,
Okay.
the city has control over annexation.
Yeah.
Or can give us permission to serve outside the city.
Right.
But the city can't request that we provide services outside of the city directly.
I guess is the question of, does BPW have the final authority on who gets connected or not?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Because we need to look at it from a financial perspective and,
Right. Okay. And there was a lot of appreciation for the hazardous waste collection events. People really appreciate that. So not everything was bad. About the wastewater treatment plant, I think you all know, people are concerned. They don't trust Sussex County. They're proud of the wastewater treatment facility we have and the quality of the wastewater that's discharged. And, why give that up, they say, recognizing, yes, there is sea level rise and we do have a long-term issue, but, just really concerned about Sussex County and about what if the study on the impacts to the canal and nearby shoreline suggests that there will be adverse impacts. What if the agreement we negotiate with the county breaks down? What if, we're the little guys, Sussex County has a lot of money. If it comes to litigation, they're probably going to prevail. So there's all that concern in among the customers, and this may be a little premature, but there's certainly an interest in continuing to look at the other options, not quite as GHD outlined them, but looking at some out of the box thinking and different technologies, different options without spending engineering money to do it, and maybe forming a wastewater treatment contingency planning group. So, because without that, how do we get to say no to Sussex if we need to? Electricity, a lot of interest overall in alternative energy, particularly solar, to a lesser extent wind. Offshore wind was great idea. They like that idea. Onshore wind, they don't like it. They'd like to see power lines moved underground, make our city more beautiful and our power more reliable. They're concerned about the loss of net metering. I don't think I put it down here because there's nothing we can do about that. That was a state law. But concerned about solar power, electric vehicles, and the grid, and will they all match up at the right time? Yeah.
And, I think one of the things pointed out was that we had Sargent Lundy, which is an international engineering firm, do an electrical study for us. Oh God, I can't remember when. That had to be 4 years ago also.
2019, 20.
Yeah, pre-COVID. So, and they did a total system-wide analysis, looked at the feeders, the transformers, used at that time the industry EV adoption rates. But once again, they were hampered by the fact that we didn't have AMI. So they could not look at individual transformers and households. So I share the concern over EV adoption is moved, but we need to be able to get the data to be able to move the next step ahead. But the bottom line from the Sargent Lundy report was from a network perspective, the system was okay and is okay into the future. They provided recommendations for upgrades to the transformers as we move forward, when they need to be replaced. But I think after we get AMI in, hopefully, then we can get data and get them to update their analysis. Because EVs have moved forward drastically. And the problem is that we don't have, as we discussed, good visibility because, many of our people live other places. So the cars are not registered here, but they come here and they plug in. So.
And there was some talk about, as we get more alternative energy sources, we're going to need battery storage. So it works when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing.
So the smoke isn't overhead.
Yeah. And I know it's a city issue, but there's definitely support for dark sky lighting. So, and there was a question, are all our street lights now LEDs? Are they a mix? Some of them make a lot of noise. Some of them are too bright, that kind of stuff. A lot of lighting complaints.
Number, what percentage of?
They're not all LEDs, but as they retire them, they switch over the ballast to accept an LED bulb.
Yeah, I think that we gotta be fairly far along there.
Yeah, all the Cobra headlights are LEDs.
And people were hoping maybe, I told them BPW couldn't do it, but maybe the city could require that new buildings have alternative energy sources like solar, rooftop solar, or, you know, small wind turbines on the roofs. I don't think we have enough wind for that, but you know, that the city should consider that because we got to get the energy from somewhere. So that was pretty much it about power. Water. There's a general concern with all the development and all the groundwater pumping and will we have saltwater intrusion? Will these new developments cause water pollution? You know, do we have adequate groundwater for all the people moving in and going forward?
And so, you know, on that, we are putting monitoring wells in to protect us from the Ebenezer Canary Creek. The county's been very cooperative and requiring monitoring wells on the other side of Kings Highway for the developments on that side. And we obviously are having the wellhead protection area study done. So it's of concern to all of us also. And
I gotta say, when I read about the Sergeant Lundy study, I was wondering who this guy Sergeant Lundy was. So
Can we get a
thank you for
colonel?
clarifying that.
I think he's been promoted at this point.
Okay, and obviously, you know, a lot of concern of groundwater in the pipes, people ruining their whites in the laundry, you know, complaints about how much they have to run the water to get it to clear up. Why isn't there some other way to test these newly required by the city installation of sprinkler systems? That sort of thing. And then there were some people asking why water costs so much. And I suspect those were people who don't have irrigation meters and maybe used to use well water or something, but I didn't look into that because I don't think our water costs all that much. And I apologize for that. Stormwater, people are concerned with, you know, the frequency of storms. Frequency of 100-year storms and lots of rain, and where does it go? And our streets are flooding. And what are we doing to address that long term? And, you know, talks about building more wetlands rather than allowing development so close to the wetlands. You know, let the wetlands expand, don't confine them. A lot of that concern about what are we going to do as sea level rises and storms are more frequent and of higher intensity, and how is the city and BPW together planning on dealing with it? So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I assume the wastewater treatment plant was probably number one as a
Yes.
category.
Yes.
What would be the number two category? And I'm not trying to break
Okay.
it down like that. I'm just curious.
Number two, I would think would be energy. You know, looking at alternatives for energy. There are a lot of people in the city who are conservation minded and are concerned about sea level rise and storms and the impact of global warming and CO2 emissions, and would like to see us tackle that as a city rather than waiting for us to be required to.
So one would be wastewater, two would be electricity. Is that a way?
I'd say, yeah,
And what would be third?
water.
Thank you.
And I don't think I've seen numbers recently, but there was a point where Lewes had some of the highest solar home solar
Per capita.
per capita. Yeah.
It's still the same. I mean, we have 130 or 140 installations throughout the city. I think you got 1.4 megawatts of solar installed, 1.3 megawatts maybe.
So
But I mean, even from a power portfolio standpoint, most of a very large percentage of our power portfolio is no emission natural gas. We have the Laurel Hill Wind Farm. We have the Milford Solar. We're always looking from a DMEC perspective at expanding into different markets. So it's always something that we always want to exceed, at least meet, but we always exceed RPS standards. So
So-
What you're talking about was residential.
Right,
was that-
residential in city.
I was there when they mentioned that at APPA. I was surprised to both Darren and me. But it'd be interesting that if APPA still is measuring that, or be interesting to where we stand, because we were in the top 10.
Yeah, and it supports, the position that people in Lewis are environmentally conscious, because the adoption rate of solar down here has been very large. It does have some negative aspects to it, but that's, people are,
I would feel that we're probably high in EVs too, relative to the general population.
Probably so. Okay, so that's what I have.
This is really nice. Thanks.
anything else anyone else want to bring up relative to the elections? Things we learn from it that we need to change or look at going forward? I think the key ones are registration and, trying to get that. That's not unfortunately, it's not a clean cut that it's like you can vote and you can't vote. It's a lot of conditions. So
Do you have language in your rules about when or whether people get removed if they don't vote in consecutive
yeah,
elections?
After-
That does happen.
after two elections that they haven't voted
Yep.
in.
That's the same for the city. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to open forum general discussion on proposed city policy related to development review.
So we talked this, Tom and I and Andrew and Anne Marie meet frequently and we discuss kind of like, general topics that are going on. And one of them was, I think as things progressed, what the BPW started to receive was most of all the reviews when it comes to preliminary submissions for developments. And what we worked towards and what I worked with Anne Marie on was basically creating a line of delineation that says, prior to, and Robin and I discussed this, we actually wanted to see if we could add in there number 5, it says once plans are finalized, to say once plans are finalized and the developer's agreement is executed as the delineation point, because after that time, then we pick up an escrow account, which is defined in our developer's agreement. And that's when we post the escrow account, we start drawing from that escrow account, and we have the provisions for replenishment. So that's what we worked on, and Anne Marie took it back to her council, and I believe they wanted the blessing of the board on if you guys agree with it as well. Just in terms so you guys can understand. So the BPW policy is to charge 15% for admin fees when you're dealing with, in this circumstance, where we would basically in most applications, we would be billed from GMB, and then we would turn around and bill a developer with 15%. I believe the most recent one that came through was a proposal of like 9,000. So the lost revenue would be 15% of the 9,000. But what we're struggling with from an administrative perspective is that we're sitting here billing stuff that if a developer asks us questions, we can't answer those questions because it's not under our purview. Some of it may not be under our purview. So it's a very unique situation for us, the way that it's set up currently. And what this does is it's basically the city setting up an escrow policy for preliminary review up until the DA point. We have a policy from when the DA point starts to when it's done, which is how it's written in the developer's agreement. So that's how it's outlined as of right now. Or what's proposed, I should say.
Questions, comments?
Sounds reasonable, yeah.
I think the only thing, go ahead, Charlie.
My only question is, are we basically saying that like preliminary and final approval processes goes through the city and then the construction phase goes through the BPW?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know whether like the DA execution actually happens before construction phase starts.
Yeah, I don't think you would have construction phase start before
Okay,
DA.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That'd be the only thing that we would ask for an addition, is basically saying you guys bless it with the notion that it would be once plans are finalized and a DA is executed.
So we need a motion to accept this. So a motion to accept
Approved.
the recommendations of the staff.
It's technically approved. Motion to approve.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I move that we approve the recommendations of staff on the collecting escrow and payment of engineering expenses for development review
By the city of Lewis.
by the city of Lewis.
Second,
I would add in there that you would want to add in from
Yes.
the time, the city's policy would be up until the execution of a developer's agreement.
With Austin's clarification.
Yes, with Austin's clarification.
And Richard, confirm your second with the clarification.
no,
That's why we asked.
yes, I confirm. Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Anne Marie, thank you for my street sign. Oh, well, you facilitated it. Thank you. Somebody stole the street sign. I don't know. I don't think they stole it. It could have been. It was gone for a couple of weeks.
It was one of those terrorist osprey.
Yeah.
I saw him flying away with it.
Probably in his basement.
Or somewhere in Delta.
Yeah.
All right, so open forum, general discussion on the wastewater treatment plant. So we had our workshop last week. I guess the one thing I do want to address is the article that was in the Cape Gazette on Friday. So we're still waiting for further information, but DNREC has done a archaeological phase 1 and found significant artifacts. And so now they're going to do a phase 2 study. And this will impact specifically the bike path, the conversion of the fields to trees and drip irrigation and other aspects of that project. It does not take the Wolf Neck facility off the table though, but more discussions and more detail need to be found out about that.
You know, that surprised me when I read it, because when we designed that plant, they did a phase 1. They identified one site on the property, which was the remnants of a house that was built in 1901. It wasn't even an ancient thing. It was just, and that was addressed. So I'm surprised that if that wasn't decided back then, unless they're in an area that.
Was that just for the retention area and the
No, it
building,
was for the site,
the whole site, the whole
Yeah.
farm and everything?
A
Okay.
farm area also.
as far as I remember. Yeah,
Um,
they usually don't do pizzas, you know. So but
So-
they evidently found some other things, because
Yeah.
phase 2 was needed, but there was a phase
So
1.
DNREC did call the county and let them know. So
I saw that, yeah.
so
That was a surprise to me because I was on, I think, the phase 1 investigation back in 2019. And if you saw the pictures of me during my campaign out in the field, that's where I was.
Did you drop something or anything?
No, but we did find remnants of an old house, and we found a lot of shell middens, from prehistoric time, and they talked about doing a phase 2 back then, and then it just kind of stopped because of, I guess, COVID. And and they said they were just doing it in terms of knowing where the trail would go. Yeah,
So that, but the phase one you're talking about was back when Wolf Neck was actually built, right?
Yeah,
oh,
Yeah, so
they
that,
found a root cellar from an old house. I mean, they
so that was,
$350,000. I remember that.
that was.
It sounds like they found it again
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
and again.
well, there
I
was
guess it's been a long
water
time.
insurance and things like that too, but yeah.
So, I mean, we don't have a lot more detail at this point, but just want everyone to be informed on that. We will have another workshop on the 19th, as I said earlier. And we're continuing discussions with the county to try to put a draft together of an agreement and see if we can have a meeting of the minds there. And that's about it.
Public comment is still open.
What's that? Oh,
Public comment. is
oh,
still
public
open.
comments open until this Friday, right?
Mhm.
And do we have any yet?
No.
Okay. So that was all I had on that item.
Well, I still, as I suggested earlier, I would like to see an ad hoc committee
Oh,
for,
I'm sorry.
yes,
You're right.
formation of an ad hoc committee to look at wastewater treatment plant contingency planning. Not to hire engineers, not to do, spend any money from the BPW coffers, but to look for some citizens and maybe another board member to look into the Narita technology as an alternative, either under option 1 or option 2, and to do a little bit more out of the box thinking in case negotiations fail or the environmental studies prove to be detrimental.
Is it just that one technology you want to look at, or could there be others?
There could be others as well. Yes, I think we should be open-minded, but not looking at what GHD, not second guessing them, because their numbers are their numbers and they were produced using good engineering practices. We just think there are other ways there are people who think there are other ways to do it.
And I was aware that you look at the other technologies for option 2, but I don't know how they would fit in with option 1.
I'm not sure either, but
Because we don't have the space there to build a new plant while keeping the old plant operating.
right, unless possibly you had 2 locations for the wastewater treatment plant. The beach side and the city side, and you had like, there are.
How big would the plant need to be with a new technology? And I know you're not even probably that
Yeah.
far into it.
I don't know. I'm thinking less than 5 acres.
So, but what I don't understand is, it sounds like you're looking for technologies that we would have a new treatment plant someplace other than where the existing treatment plant is. So basically, the number 2 items, those options where we have a plant someplace. One of the biggest hurdles is where would you put it? I mean, that kind of, I don't understand. That was one of the biggest reasons we turned down those items. That because finding a site suitable and acceptable for a treatment plant is almost impossible near the city of Lewes, and the cost would be exorbitant.
Well,
So I'm not
and the-
sure.
And the piping costs.
Yeah, you
Plus.
gotta pipe it there, and I mean, it seems like even at the outset, just considering that, they're basically the reasons we probably didn't put serious thought into furthering those items. So it seems to me as a fool's errand to do this, because we're spinning our wheels, and you only have, if our schedule works out the way we think it is now, we should have a contract hopefully signed, a tentative contract at least, because the long range testing of the canal is not going to be done, but by the end of the summer, we're shooting for that. So that gives you about 10 weeks at best, not even that now, to put the group together to start having meetings. And you just can't look through books or magazines or something for a treatment thing. That's really a lot of work to try to really seriously evaluate them. So I don't see what you would get done. The other thing, as I mentioned before, we're not in a rush. I mean, if the county falls away, it's not as if we have to have a new option right away. We still have years to evaluate and plan it. So it seems like something that we're going to jam in there that's not very feasible, not very realistic. And I just don't understand why we would spend the time and have meetings and.
Well, but I think if Barbara's willing to lead a subcommittee and, pulling outside resources and doing in parallel, it's probably, and, recognizing that we're still going to proceed down the path with option 3, working out an agreement. There's no harm, no foul. Now, the question is, Mike, can we actually do that? Because this wasn't set for an action item.
Yeah, you could. I mean, there's best practice in there. So there's 2 questions in your one question. The first question is, can you do it? Yes, you can establish a committee. It's under the broad agenda topic. You can establish the committee via motion. The second point, though, is best practice when you have a committee is we typically try to do that via resolution so that it's clear of the charge and membership. So you can, via motion, establish a committee, but the motion should include membership, number of folks, how membership is selected, scope of review, what you're charging them, timing to report back to the board. Those are things we would typically include in a resolution and then the board would adopt the resolution, and that's what would form the committee. So best practice, if we can, if there's time, if you can do it this way, is to do it via resolution. But to answer your question, you can do it via motion.
Well, once again, to press this point about, the constraint on time here and the fact that, we want to set them, Barbara up to do some research. Seems like, so Barbara, do you have people that you had in mind?
I have a couple, yes. Let's see. One I've spoken to, one I haven't yet spoken to, but I also thought about talking to maybe University of Delaware.
But if I can make a suggestion and just, so we have the workshop
Yes.
on the 19th. We have a regular meeting the week after on the 26th. You have the holiday week next week. So I understand timing is a factor, but I mean, you're really talking if it's the 19th of a week and a half. Yeah. So
We could do it at the workshop.
you would have to put it on the agenda. And so typically, again, best practice is not to take action during a workshop. You can do it since we are in public session here and we're talking in open session here. If you signal to the public the intention is to consider a resolution at the workshop, then you can add that to the agenda.
So we do it basically at the very beginning
Correct.
this way, and then we can go into the workshop itself.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is the workshop, but it's on, as long as it's on an agenda that meets the requirements of FOIA, you can take action, but the agenda just has to make clear that you are considering an item for action.
I'd be supportive as well.
So I think Mike's suggestion there is that rather than acting today, doing it on the 19th.
The only thing I would ask, if I can work with Barbara to put the resolution together, and then we can bring that and circulate it to the board.
And then you can use the time in between here to reach out to.
Yes.
And could the subcommittee be just Barbara, or does it have to be 2 members of the board?
I'll double check that, but I think you can just have one board member. The key is in understanding that the subcommittee can't take action on behalf of the board. It's just merely a recommendation, recommending body.
Thank you.
All right. Call to the public. I don't think we, oh.
That would be me.
Oh.
I bet you would.
Nice try, Tom. Nice try.
I want to, on a light note, start to say that moving public comment at the beginning would be a good idea, especially today, because I have a 2-hour party. My name is Vince Cotter, COTTER, 15617 Ethel Way, Tower Hill, Lewes, Delaware. I'm here today because I've been working through Christina Keller in the Water Department office about an excessive high water bill. And she's given me the policy statements that are pretty typical and understandable in most cases. I received a water bill that was approximately for 1 month, $750 and some change. In this particular water bill, the cycle for the bill was between April 14th and May 17th. It's a new property. I did not settle on that property until the 22nd. So there's approximately a week in there where I didn't even own the property. Now, I think the confusion occurred because of settlement in general. Attorneys and so forth want a water meter reading in advance, so that it was read on the 14th. But I really didn't own the property till the 22nd, and I personally called to activate the service. So, you know, I'm asking it from one perspective to say, I'm not really responsible for that week. Now, really, it wouldn't matter too much to me, but in this particular case, with this particular bill, it amounts to about almost $190 per week. So it is a significant amount of money that I'm asking you to take into consideration. Secondly, with the bill itself, I settled on the 22nd. I left for Florida and I did not return until June 8th. There was not a toilet that was flushed. The water was shut off. There was no water usage in the house whatsoever, none. I shut the water off myself. The irrigation system did stay on. Now, that's where the issue probably came in. It was either over irrigated or there was potentially a leak in that particular system. Now, my contention is the water was used exclusively for irrigation. I was not here. I can provide documentation on my whereabouts. I can give you travel information as to when I moved. I can give you travel information when I left here, when I stayed in Florida, when I returned. There was never once was water turned on in my particular property. What I'm saying is that water that was used was for irrigation. It was never treated by a sewer system at all, not once. That water went into the ground, it dissipated, it was used exclusively for that. So what I'm recommending, or I'm asking for an accommodation and some consideration regarding this bill to possibly waive the sewer charge on it and look at it as totally irrigation. Because it is an expensive proposition here, $750 for a postage size stamped house with postage lawn on it. So I'm here today basically to ask an accommodation. I understand the policies and procedures, and I understand the difficulty it is to make exceptions for individuals. But I can provide all the documentation that you need. I can give you the actual, I didn't know there'd be so many people here today. I have 3 copies of the water bill. Some people have a copy of it. I could give it to whomever would like to examine it.
I've already seen it, so
Anyone else would like to see it? Take a look at it.
solicitor, that you'll be asked in executive session. So I appreciate your time and consideration. I'm looking forward to being a resident in this community and participating. And I at one time did serve on a board, and I understand the situation you're in. So
Who was responsible for the operation of the sprinkler system?
well, as of the 22nd,
of April, I would be responsible because I accepted the property as it is. The system was turned on. I believe there was a leak, but again, the domestic water piece was shut off. And I recognize the fact that I don't own a farm. I don't want to install an irrigation meter. I don't want to put a well in or a pit that's been recommended. Any of those options, I don't want to go there because of the expense to doing it. But there's no domestic water that was used during that particular time.
So your ask is not only for this bill, but any bill moving forward.
Well, this particular bill is fairly high. I mean, the next bill will probably be slightly higher. But I did turn the system off when I got here in June. There would be probably another bill that was probably a 3-week period prior to June 8th that would probably be impacted as well, but not as severely. I don't believe there's only a 3-week period. That's basically what I'm looking for, an accommodation.
Have you found a leak in the irrigation system or?
Well, I identified the leak when I got here. That's why I turned the system on. And lo and behold, I expected, I did expect, knowing there was a leak, that I would, have a higher bill, but I never expected, a bill of this nature.
Just to make sure I understand, so there was a period that you were charged when you didn't yet own the house.
Correct.
How many days?
7 days.
7 days.
Just so you know, the way that it works is that the settlement attorney tells you the date that you want the meter read, that meter's read, the transfer of service happens.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah,
I
and
did
I'm just,
mention-
for these
I
guys.
did mention that here, the attorney before settlement, because logically, when you realize you settle on a certain day, you can't have a meter reading on that particular day. So the meter's read ahead of time. But I didn't assume responsibility for the property until the 22nd. So really, there's a gap of 7 days in which I am not the owner. The real person that should be charged is the developer. In this particular case, not me.
Have you gone back to the developer?
Well, I've reached out to the developer at this point in time as well. I'm looking for some accommodation somewhere. I'm not looking, but the reality is I didn't take possession. I'm not the owner for that 7-day period.
On that
Pretty
piece,
clear.
I'm sorry, on that piece, I would also reach out to your settlement attorney on that
I
point.
have contacted Tim Willard, who's the attorney in town.
And just so you know, so Chris's response through this, and I've worked with her on it, is that it's billed 80% of water usage. So we have folks that irrigate through their domestic line, just as if this is set up. They operate that way and they don't look at making any sort of changes. The options in this case were an irrigation meter, which clearly identifies what is being used for irrigation. We have irrigation rates specifically for that, which then does not get billed through the sewer usage. And then the other option is because they are outside the city limits, they have the option of applying for an ag well through DNREC. And both of those were provided in this case.
Yeah, and that's accurate. I did talk to Kristen about those particular things, and I understand that, totally. My point that I think is the accommodation and exception to the rule was I wasn't here. There was no domestic water utilized at any time. And the water was shut off. The only water was irrigation water, and that dissipated in the ground. It was never treated by the sewer department.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Call to the press. I don't think we have. Then motion to go into executive session,
So move.
seconded by Earl. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. And Sharon will be posting a link. Okay. Thank you very much. Open forum general discussion on Cape Cove MOU and DNREC. So do I have a motion to approve both documents by title only?
Not a resolution, but
Okay.
no, so it would simply be a motion to approve the drinking water grant and the clean water trust grant MOUs, both for the Capes Cove project.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So then, make a motion. Well, actually, I'll leave it to you to make the wording for the motion that we need to make.
I think you've covered both.
Oh, but it was, and staff and legal to
Thank you.
finalize the document.
See, I do make mistakes. I made a mistake there. So just the addition to it, we won't do another motion, but just for the record is to direct staff to finalize the documents with the relative agencies and go forward with this, with signing the same. So not a motion. Everybody agrees with that. That is the understanding. Thank you. My apologies.
So a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Good night, folks.
Good night.